are live. Hey, everybody. Welcome. It's Tari from Events and Community at Miria. I have with me Andrew. He's our CTO, and he's going to share some thoughts on AI gaming, which I'm sure we all know is coming one way or the other. So it's just a matter of whether it's for the better, whether it's for the kind of a more grim future to be held. We have no idea. Andrew, how are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Yeah, I love the topic, so I'm happy to be here.
Oh yeah, definitely. I'm stoked to talk about it too. You are no stranger to gaming, as someone who's held technology director roles behind games like Borderlands, Civilization, Pirates, XCOM. I've had the pleasure of playing XCOM a little bit back in the day, so this one's a little bit of a treat for me as well. But of course, with your work leading teams as well in EA, Sony, and Ubisoft, and now Miria. You've had your boat in the water for quite some time now. How well acquainted are you with AI at the moment? I guess from both a personal and also a technical perspective.
Sure. Well, so first of all, just for people because we've done a series of AMAs and things, but for people who don't know me, yeah, my name is Andrew Silber. I've been in the games industry for probably close to 30 years now. Um, my degree is actually in cognitive science from Yale, and but I've spent most of my professional career in game development. I've been sort of super passionate about AI actually since I was a kid. So, back in the days when there was Eliza and chatbots, and I would watch, war games and seeing HAL from 2001: Space Odyssey. Um, I've just always been super interested in AI, and so I'm really happy these days that I mean, and we'll get into sort of the history, I think, of AI and gaming a little bit more going forward. But right now, it really is having a heyday, with all of the new developments in generative AI and all that sort of thing. But yeah, I mean, I've had a lot of opportunity to work in AI, so just even professionally. So I've written a lot of like racing game AI. I did H2 Overdrive, I did Dirty Driving, I did a Batman game, I did Freaky Flyers. For AI, I wrote an AI visual engine, like a scripting system for all of the AI that allows them to sort of reason and things. I wrote the AI for Field Commander, which is a turn-based strategy game for Sony for the PSP. So yeah, it's something that I've had my hands in, but it on the other hand, it really is a field that is evolving so rapidly and it's getting so specialized that in some ways it's very difficult to sort of stay on the cutting edge of every little aspect of it. But try.
Yeah, so you've had your hands in the toolbox for a while now. What I've been noticing really is, I guess, an upsurge in recent years of news and developments pertaining to AI, right? And it's not just in gaming, but then it's in different sectors across the world, be it through finance, education, art, literature. People are starting to fear for their jobs a little bit. But maybe we can just take a little cross section in gaming in particular. How is AI used in gaming? What did it look like maybe in a more primitive state before it started to super accelerate to what it is today? And I guess what are some of the more major changes that got us to this point?
Sure. Well, that's a great but very deep
Yeah.
question. So right. So, I mean, AI, the idea of a game having AI, there's nothing new there. I mean, in the sense that, every game that's ever, almost every game that's ever been written, has sort of a single player mode. And so you play against the computer. I mean, the canonical sort of, play chess or this or that. And so, AI, um, qua AI has always been in gaming. So, but historically, a lot of the AI, I would say 90+% of the AI that people experience is actually quite simple. So I would say that in the traditional AI, traditional gaming AI, um, which I mean, and we'll just define it as any player or any game element that's actually controlled by the computer, not a human, is comprised of things like state machines. I'm going to use a little technical terminology. You guys can read the transcript and look it up a little bit later, or we can discussed it in the chat room, um, is a combination of things like state machines, which is basically just, if you're in state this and this happens, then do that, and then switch to another state. Maybe your an AI is patrolling. He detects somebody entering his detection radius, and so he goes into an attack mode, and then that will time out, when you leave the attack range, and then it'll go back into into a patrol mode or something. So these very simple state machines, plus pathfinding. So we have these traditional algorithms like A star, using nav meshes, which are a very sort of computation intensive but exhaustive way of finding a way from getting any character in any sort of directed graph to any other, meaning that it's just how enemies can navigate around obstacles and things like that and find their way to come attack you. And then in games like traditional chess games or strategy games, we have a technique that you use called like a min-max algorithm, or alpha beta pruning is sort of a variant on that, where basically the computer, just by virtue of being a machine, can run a huge number of scenarios in its head, evaluate them all, and then eliminate ones, when it'll explore some paths, eliminate paths which yield lower results, and then finally zoom in on a move like a chess move which yields the greatest net result, if you assign a sort of a scoring capacity for, or a scoring metric for the state of the board. And then traditional things like goal trees, where if you have a set of rules for AI players, where they, maybe it knows it wants to attack you. Well, then it has a set of rules, like if want to attack, need, then you have a set of conditions, need a weapon. Okay, then you'll push that into a stack, and then you'll say, okay, I need a weapon now. How do where can I find one? So it has this hierarchical set of goals which it can push and pop from stack, and then make some decisions. So these are very traditional sort of AI paradigms. And then there some of the ones which have been traditional but a little bit more uh, you know uh, take a little bit more training, a little bit more work, are things like using reinforcement learning, um, which is a whole topic unto itself, um, which basically allows a game to train by simulating and then rewarding itself for positive moves and penalizing itself and then developing these policies. Um, and that's a traditional one which has been evolving lately. And that's the sort of thing that actually, this sort of reinforcement learning is actually what's led to the development of things like self-driving cars. Um, so yeah, I mean, there is definitely an evolution from traditional AI into some of the new stuff, which is um, the generative AI, which is really the new hotness, and all of the natural language processing, which, I mean, we can talk about, when it comes to how those things play a part in game development. Like I said, first of all, a little disclaimer: I may ramble. It's a big topic, and so I'm going to count on you, Tarye, and also the community to keep me on track, because, like I said, I get super excited about all of this, and if I'm not careful, I will do a deep dive into one of them, and then at the expense of some other topic.
Rabbit
So
hole.
please feel free to jump in and cut me off and say, "Okay, that's enough. All right, let's
No, that's
stay on
cool.
target."
Yeah, I'll just mute you and then ask the next question. I think that's a great
Yeah.
way to
Um,
proceed. But yeah, definitely, I do like that distinction. From traditional, I guess, traditional gaming algorithms of just pure basic arithmetic of move one square, move two squares, to this whole new other thing of prioritization, goal setting, all these other cool things in the picture. I guess what thing also that comes into mind when we talk about AI from a gaming perspective is really NPCs, right? Because
hmm,
it seems like out of everything other out of everything else in the game, all the other elements, it seems like it's NPCs that have some semblance of artificial behavior, right? And that would kind of beg the question from a developer point of view, what is it like to implement AI within an NPC? And sort of what is the mechanism to quote unquote spike an NPC's brain with a neural network such as an AI tool?
hmm. Well, that's again a super deep question, so I'm gonna try to answer it as best I can. So again, traditional NPCs were very dumb. Um, That is to say, you would walk up to an NPC and maybe he'd have a quest to give you or something, and he would, speak. He would have some preset lines, which, he would spit based on what state of the quest, for example, you were in. He'd spit some specific, some pre-canned written dialogue at you, substituting in your name and, a couple of other little things. But for the most part, it was completely done. Um, and of course, the NPC's behavior very, very, very often is state machine driven. And one of the reasons for that, and this is actually one of the big challenges that we can talk about a little bit later, is that on the one hand, a game developer wants to bring a specific experience, a specific gaming experience to the user, meaning, they want to, for example, control how, do they get a starting a very simple task and then make the quest more difficult and this and that, sort of balance their need to focus the and control the user experience versus what we're leaning into these days, which is customizing to the point of everybody's experience is unique, which is the other end of the spectrum. The problem is that how do you deliver something which on the one hand gets what captures the essence of what the designer wants to do, but also gives a unique experience to the player. So um, in the case of NPCs, one thing I will tell you, actually, though, is that very often in NPCs and in player-controlled characters, uh, people have a people project. They project a lot of what their own biases are onto the character. So even if the game AI is actually written very simple, maybe it has a very simple set of rules, the interaction of those rules can make it look like the AI is doing something super intelligent. For example, I remember when I was doing racing games, I would write a set of overarching goals and then some simple algorithms, and then during the gameplay, the real time interaction of those would have these emergent properties, wherein a car would sort of seem to come in and cut the other one off, and people would go, "Oh, that guy's a dick. He's been coming after me since the first lap, and boy, I saw him trying to draft, and now he cut me off," and attributing a lot more behavior to the NPC
Mm.
than was really there. And so, games have sort of benefited from that. People sort of projecting their own interpretation of what's going on. But these days, for the way that we're leaning now, and again, this is a subject of a lot of research, R&D right now, has to do with using NPCs to one vary up their the text, literally the text and things that they give you, the dialogue. So, at a very superficial level, sort of altering it based on a few things that's been going on, in the game. So the things that people have been doing to do that has been using leveraging some of these large language models. So people use Chat GPT and Llama, and I mean, you can any game company can go onto Hugging Face, and download one of these 7 billion parameter or 1 billion parameter or however many billion parameter models, and then um, they can through prompt engineering and through fine tuning, um, they can, and also with um, uh, retrieval augmented generation, they can write their AI so that it will take into consideration. It's basically will automatically generate a prompt for all of these people. This is sort of a little inside baseball for using GPT, but like if you generate a prompt with a few cues that say what's been going on, and then maybe a few variation things, and then say, okay, now generate me a piece of text, which which the NPC can say to the player, based which will reflect some of the things, the decisions that they've done, then we can get this much more natural type of interaction. And then and of course you have to be very careful with that because you don't want it to. One of the big problems with these language models is that they will sometimes just hallucinate. I mean, there's a term that's kind of thrown around in the industry, and that is, these large language models are designed to predict text based on a probabilistic kind of a model, and so they will always come up with something to say, but sometimes they'll just say something which, given all of the inputs, sounds reasonable, even though in your game it might not actually be real. So you have to be very careful when you're actually prompting these models that it doesn't say something that you don't want it to say. So there's a lot of training and testing needs to go into it. Um, and then one level deeper than that, for NPC behavior. And this is something which I think is even it's a fascinating area of research, but it's again something which even more than just the dialogue is subject to the AI going off the rails. And that is that these large language models, because they've just trained on a huge corpus of human knowledge, these language models extract they've extracted logic rules and and patterns which go far beyond just simple language. They understand at a structural level sort of cause and effect and things. And so what you can actually do is invent um, a little symbolic language that represents your game state, and then tell the language model, okay, based on these rules and based on the current state of the game, which you feed in you feed in the patterns according to how you've defined the gameplay. Now, make a move that follows along the game rules. And so, using the language model, it will leverage that deeper semantic level or that deeper logic level, and then actually come up with unique moves for the game player to do, not just things to say, but actually things for it to do. Like if you ever played around with GPT and you said, what would you do if you found yourself surrounded by, man-eating tigers and this and that? It'd probably come up with, it'd probably think of some some good solution which doesn't actually exist explicitly in the database, but just can come up with. So it's fascinating what people are working on. But again, this is it's something which really takes a lot of work to get right. And I think that it really is going to it really emphasizes the need for sort of explainability, which is another term we can discuss. But I feel like I've been talking and talking and talking, and I have gone off the reservation. So I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Yeah, no, but like I love that how it's kind of similar. You know what the things you've been mentioning, it's quite similar to me to D&D, to Dungeons and Dragons. Not so sure if you're familiar, but it does deal with those types of things, right? State-based machines. Certain conditions will trigger if certain rules are or conditions are met. It is pre-programmed, but then at the same time, the player has some level of freedom when it comes to the creativeness of the solutions that they come up with during the game. And just to have this simulated through AI, I think is really interesting, especially when you start to think about games that have a lot of AI or a lot of NPCs in one place, in one space. So the collision of particles are just going to be out of whack, it seems. And there you have that sort of unpredictable thing that comes with several multiple players come into the picture, or several multiple NPCs start to interact with one another. So I think that's actually pretty cool and really chaotic in the best way, but also could be in a very dangerous way, which we'll start to kind of tackle a little bit later on. What I wanted to ask
Sure.
also was given that we're Miria and we deal with Web3 gaming, is there any special application of AI within Web3 gaming?
Um, well, so it's certainly important to note that like any advances in AI that can be used in Web 2, in traditional gaming, of course, can also be used in Web 3 gaming. So, it's so and we still actually there's still actually quite a bit of uses for AI that we haven't even touched upon yet. I mean, all of the generative AI and all that sort of stuff. So we can circle back to that afterwards. In terms of Web three, qua Web three, there are uh, some use cases which are pretty which are useful very specifically in Web three. So very often NFTs and things like that can be used are algorithmically generated. That is to say, originally with Bored Apes and things like that, it was just a simple combination algorithm. But using AI to generate these different um, NFTs and different in-game assets certainly is something which and then the fact that they're AI generated means that there's a certain amount of processing involved. So if you can imagine sort of a proof of work to generate some of these NFTs based on AI, there's something interesting there. Um, One thing that so this sort of speaks to some of the future AI, but I mean, this way down the road is leveraging, for example, in our Miria ecosystem, we have all of our nodes which underpin the system, and right now they're used for transaction validations and other very blockchain oriented things. However, it's also a very good source of decentralized compute. So if you can imagine a world in which we have a game in that you can train up your own AI bots. Maybe you want to have battle tanks or battle bots play each other. Then, if you have myriad nodes, then you can dedicate all of that processing capability towards training up, your own personal characters and things like that. Is actually one kind of fun potential use for it. I mean, I think that, like I said, I think that's a little down the road. Um, Obviously using AI to detect fraud and anti-money laundering and all sorts of like shenanigans on blockchain and people who are bad actors. I think is will certainly take a cue from traditional Web 2 gaming because they're already using a lot of bot detection and other things to prevent people from scamming the system. And so I think that that's going to be additionally important in um, in Web3. Um, and I mean, I think, and now I'm certainly going off the reservation, but I think that in one of the things that AI, one of the interesting intersections that I've been sort of considering for AI um, in the Web3 world is that um, the trend is heading towards people being able to have agents. So in other words, like right now, people, if you've used GPT, ChatGPT, you can have it perform little tasks for you. Maybe write me a program, write me a poem, and iterate. But as you were sort of speaking to before, these sort of self-modifying AI type mechanisms whereby they can interact with themselves and engage in feed their own output into their own input and engage in sort of reasoning, and there's a bunch of different platforms that are experimenting with this. Then we're moving towards a world in which there are AI, people will have personalized AI agents, which can, hey agent, go out and rent me a room, a hotel, and I'd like something within this dollar range, and I want it to be on the beach, and I want to be able to have these sort of amenities. And then it would figure out, it would navigate the web, try to find deals on different sites. Maybe it would have to go across paywalls and things like that. So using Web3, using the blockchain as currency to empower these AIs, as opposed to just giving it your credit card and saying, okay, you know what, go subscribe to all of these different platforms and just letting it um, you know just spend all of your money or whatever. You'd be able to leverage the blockchain as a way to sort of silo the AI's behavior in terms of, if it's going to be spending some of your crypto or your, various other assets. So, I mean, I think that there are a lot of applications of AI in Web3 and Web3 gaming specifically, but a fair number of them are certainly way down the road.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And that also doesn't even cover. It's a big wide world over there, right? And it doesn't even cover all the heavy lifting that could be accomplished from, I guess, quality assessments, testing edge cases, and basically just do all of the components of web development that takes years and years to complete. I think behind the scenes, AI will also play a part in just speeding along those processes. Like I could just imagine 10, 20 years from now, people saying that, oh, back in my day, I used to do Blender by myself and I used to use Illustrator by myself. And that would be the new old thing because in the future, robots will probably be doing it in our behalf. So that's an interesting prospect, I think. Um,
Mm.
Absolutely. So when it comes to we mentioned applications in Web3 gaming, and that also sort of begs the question how AI could potentially be used in Miria Studio titles down the road.
Well, I mean, I think that we're taking, Miria's bread and butter is games and fun. I mean, it's important. One thing that's important to realize is that our core competency is, games. first and foremost, and what is it about games? It's fun. And so for us, we are first and foremost a game focused studio, and so that means that we're not going to just use AI for its own sake, just so that we can say we are. And so we are taking a pragmatic approach towards using using AI in myriad games. So certainly, I mean, as everybody knows, and I'm sure as everybody was expecting me to say, um, you know, all of these tools like Dolly and Midjourney and Stability and Fusion are all very helpful for things like content or for concept art, and content generation. Of course, I mean, as any of you who have played with some of those tools know, wrangling them. I mean, it's sort of a herding cats kind of a thing because, at the core of these systems are these neural networks which have a challenge of explainability. That is to say, you feed in all this training data and then kind of shake it all up, and it's just this enormous. They talk about billions of parameters, but it's just a big matrix of numbers. We don't really know what they mean. And so, the and you can experience that firsthand when you, for example, if you do something like prompt engineering, or I'm sorry, if you use a tool like Dolly and you say, paint me a picture of a cat smoking a cigar, and then it comes up with something, and then you say, okay, now make that cat wearing a hat, and then it does something completely different. Why? Because it's just a big black box of very difficult to understand the interactions of numbers. And so, for these things to be a tool that Miria will be able to use, going forward, then there are going to need to be some improvements in this space. And companies like Adobe with Firefly and things like that are definitely making headway towards being able to deterministically iterate through things, rather than just have it kind of randomly spit something out. But so for us, concept art or creating, art for games and things like that is something that we're taking slowly because, like I said, first and foremost, our bread and butter is games and fun and having a visually and from a gameplay perspective, engaging experience for the user. And so, like I said, AI is a tool towards doing that. It's not the goal unto itself. Um, so yeah, I mean, we are progressively in the short term dipping our toe into using it, like I said, for concept art and things like that. Long term, I can see us using integrating automated testing systems, as you said, reinforcement learning for bots and NPCs, definitely for cheating detection. As I mentioned, decentralized compute on nodes for Miriam. um yeah, I mean, I think that but like I said, I mean, I think that it's really going to sort of be the handmaiden of the games themselves that is going to be still first and foremost, even going forward. Mm.
Oh yeah, definitely. They never get the hands right, is what I experienced using something like Dolly. It always comes
Mm.
spits out 10 fingers or so per hand, and it's just some really wacky thing. I have no idea why that's the case. Maybe it has something to do with
Well,
hands being dexterous, or there's some movement in the nodes of fingers, or something like that.
I mean, I think that it's just because if you look at a hand, like what it's doing is it's trying to sort of statistically anticipate for every any given pixel what is the next pixel. But fingers
Mm.
follow fingers, right? So in other words, it's like, well, okay, I've drawn a finger. What comes next? Well, all right, how about another finger, right? In other words, it's just um,
Yeah,
it doesn't necessarily. I mean, they're made much more improvement in that, by using like human reinforcement, human reinforcement um, in training these models. So
yeah.
it'll generate a hand, and then people will give it a thumbs down, and they'll go, okay, no. And
Right.
in some cases they'll be able to give feedback as to why, like, okay, that hand just had too many fingers. But yeah, I mean, it's a progressive process, and like I said, I mean, as you've experienced, teasing out exactly what you want almost takes as much time as creating the art yourself. I mean, and so we're
Yeah.
in this kind of weird gulf period where it does some awesome stuff, but it's not. But like I said, it takes so much hand holding for the model that it's not worth it. especially when you consider things like 3D models. So, for Meta Rush, for example, our artists, very, they craft these models, but then there's a million different things that need to be done. I mean, the models have to be built in order to accommodate, collision primitives. They have to be skinnable. They have to have, and riggable. They have to have attachment points that conform to different things that we need. So all characters have to have standardized attachment points for when you pick stuff up and things like that. And so trying to force an AI model to generate something like that, a zero shot or a one shot, and then produce something like that is actually quite hard. And I mean, I could I actually wrote up and could talk through a use case, but a study case of why it's hard to do that sort of thing. But that might be something we'll say sort of save for a coda sort of for the end of this, because I think there's probably
Yeah.
more stuff that you want to talk about.
Yeah, definitely. But yeah, I get what you mean though. Like it's really hard to train the thing because I think for the most part, when you think about movement, uh, and what seems natural or what looks natural, for the most part, us as humans, we pick it up as something subliminal. We see somebody walk by, and then I think in the back of our minds, it just registers for years and years that this is how a person's supposed to move. And so it's also maybe hard to articulate on our end, and try to train the AI exactly what it is we're looking for and how to implement that. And so maybe that's the barrier also that we need to get past before making some real development gains and productivity gains using AI in this field in particular, like you mentioned. I do have another question for you, and it might seem a bit silly or trivial to begin with, but now that I think about it, can an AI play a game? And I'm not just talking about bots or NPCs, but can it actually look at a game and try to decipher, try to, I guess, decode the rules and recognize patterns that would make it learn the game without being given any initial instructions.
Yeah, well, so NVIDIA did some really interesting research on that. Um, because I mean, what does it mean to play a game? So if I mean, but of course you provided a definition here, which is can a game, can an AI of some kind um just watch, somebody play a game, literally just look at the video buffer, just the frame buffer of a game, and discern the rules and things like that. And so NVIDIA actually did some interesting experimentation a few years ago, and wherein they trained up an AI to using reinforcement learning to play games like Pac-Man or Pong, or Pong's a pretty easy example, but to literally regenerate Pac-Man just based on watching it play. So in other words, it would just watch thousands of hours of Pac-Man being played, and then be able to run a simulation wherein the human then it goes to inference time, wherein the human provides input, and then it really can literally draw the board correctly, move the Pac-Man around correctly without any explicit programming. The answer is yes. Uh, it absolutely can. Um, it takes an enormous amount. So one of the things I was going to speak to a little earlier is it takes an enormous amount of training data. Um, so you need thousands and thousands of hours, and not only just training data, but high quality training data, because the world is filled with data that needs to be, in order for it to be usable by a machine, it needs to sort of be massaged into a canonical format, so that so that the machine knows what is um, kind of what is relevant and what is not. But so you need all of the training data, um, and then yeah, I mean, so especially with some of the models that have come out, this new structure called a transformer, which um, well, transformers are just one aspect, but all of this dimensionality reduction advancements, wherein, I mean, I'm saying a lot of fancy words, but what I'm really saying is that the ability for it to, at a layer by layer level, extract abstraction. So, a machine watching thousands and thousands of hours of Pac-Man, we'll start to see correlations between, like, the Pac-Man here and one here, and then the dot disappearing, and it will see that over and over again. The Pac-Man is here, and then the dot is gone, and it will infer eventually these high when it sees it in a number of different situations, it distills out into the latent space the notion that if a Pac-Man can travel past a dot, it will consume it. And so, these sorts of higher level rules can be extrapolated. And like I said, NVIDIA did some interesting work. We can paste the link. I think you and I looked at that link a while back. But anyway,
Right.
um, so yeah, there's absolutely no question that that computers can learn and play games like that. Whether or not it's learning in some holistic sort of transcendental sense, is
Yeah.
philosophical conversation, which as we can invite Lex Friedman over and we can have a nice
Yeah,
chat
that
about
would
it.
be great.
Um, yeah. So Lex, if you're listening, come on over.
Come on over.
Um, but yeah, but yeah, I mean, the answer is a resounding yes.
Absolutely. Yeah, that sounds pretty scary when you think about it. When they start to recognize patterns, but then I don't know, maybe somewhere in the further start to recognize, am I? Why am I being sat in front of this game? And who is trying to control me? And who are giving these instructions? It becomes a bit of like that Rick and Morty robot that's asking, "What is my purpose?" And we're just telling it to pass butter. And it's
Hmm.
starting to be a little bit of a sentience question. I digress a little bit. I was going to ask you, is AI currently being used in MetaRush?
In MetaRush, so like I said, MetaRush is in some of the use cases that we've described, just sort of talked about for AI, things like bots and things like that. MetaRush itself is a multiplayer game only, so it has no bots and it has no NPCs that use complex state machines. It is all players interacting with other players, and so that perspective, it's not. As for art, I mean, I've had lots of conversations with our artists, and we've talked about a lot of different tools and things like that that are available to them. But they've also encountered a lot of the issues that we've seen. And also, for those of you who have experimented with Dolly and some of these things, um, a lot of procedurally generated art, or whether it's or through Stable Diffusion or Dolly or whatever, has a certain synthetic quality to it. And so, you start to recognize that. And so, we're still in that kind of weird gulf where, it's easy to spot sort of, fake stuff. So I can tell you right now, all of the art in MetaRush, all of the assets, all of the animations are all lovingly handcrafted. Every triangle is sort of molded by a Miria artisan and buffed and polished and gingerly placed into the game. Um, and yeah, so for the time being, a lot of our work on MetaRush, really is, on the one hand, of course, we have our all of the Web3 aspects to it in terms of the economy and the tokenomics, but the game itself, is a traditional game in the sense that it is made by people for people.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh man, it's gonna be really, really chaotic when NVIDIA starts to release a lot of open source code and all of their AI engines, and people will start to tinker. I think what they're doing now is real time tracing and other things that make lighting way more realistic with the help of AI. Also, frame buffing with AI generated frames that go in between frames and make the FPS a little bit more smoother, even for lower spec computers, which is kind of interesting. From a player perspective, do you think the progression of AI will really disrupt gaming as we know it within the next 5 years or so? And what I mean by that is, with the current state of AI and where it's going, how much more different do you think our gaming experiences will be from the emergence of this technology?
Um, Okay, so I mean, when you ask whether AI will disrupt gaming in the next 5 years, so I know that you did actually specify the gamer experience, although I think that it would be remiss to not mention the developer experience also. Um, so in terms of gaming, yes, I mean, I think that it will be a boon to productivity for the developers, and it will certainly empower indie developers. So I think that because the cost of developing games will come way down. Um, because coding and things like that. I mean, I've spent a lot of time playing around with that, and it's pretty impressive what the code that these things are able to generate. I think we're still quite a long way from a sort of make game wizard that you just type a couple of parameters in and then it just makes you the whole game, on all the code and everything. I'm not even close to there yet. But in the hands of experienced game programmer, then these tools will be extremely productivity enhancing. And so I think that in terms of for gamers' perspective, the number of choices and things that they will have, and the number of high quality games, because right now you think about indie games, and you're like, oh, okay, they all have pixel art, or maybe they have some interesting gameplay mechanics, whatever, but they're pixel art. Why? Because it's low budget, they can't afford the art. But now, you'll get a higher quality, visual experience. It will empower the indie devs. Um, and then for traditional game players, as we discussed, the I think that AI generated content, so the ability, for example, to have these sort of non-repeating infinite worlds wherein you use a diffusion model uh, or one of these other, like a VAE to do outpainting. In other words, so some of you have probably played around with this, where you give Dolly or one of these other tools a photograph, and then you say, okay, now expand it, and it just invents more surroundings. That will
Yeah.
be able to be used in to great effect in in game development, to provide much more rich experiences. Again, the challenge there, of course, will be that you want to balance the uh, the uniqueness of it with the fact that the game developer themselves wants to actually provide a specific experience to the user. So there's a balancing act there. Um, for in terms of disrupting gameplay itself. Yeah, I mean, we'll certainly, as we talked about in the interacting with NPCs, you'll get a much more customized, personalized feel that just absolutely adds a new layer of sort of realism and immersiveness to the game, because the NPCs will start to talk a little bit about, like, oh, look what I saw, what you just did over there. You beat the crap out of that guy, and now you come over to talk to me, or whatever. Um, I think that it will make those things more interesting. One thing actually that I am excited for, I've been thinking about, is the ability for now that we have I mean, voice recognition has come a very, very long way, and so that combined with being able to turn, using this transformer technology, turning and these large language models, turning like if I bark out some orders, like if I have a voice input to a game, like let's say I'm playing some sort of tactical game in which I have several NPCs which are my squad, and I want to say, "Hey Johnson, take Mitchell and Lee and circle around the back of the bunker there and capture anyone who comes out." Well, these large language models will be able to take that and translate it into, assuming that you use, a certain amount of prompt engineering and fine tuning, turn it into a sort of canonical language where that can be translated into actual orders that are given to your units, right? So
Yeah.
you'll actually be able to tell your NPC players to go do stuff or to report back, and I think it will add a lot of immersion to it. So I think that it will be disruptive in the sense of, one, you'll get a lot more choices of games, and maybe they won't all be great, but that's where a world we live in already now. Um, but you will get more variety, you'll get more customized feel. Yeah, I mean, I'm super bullish on what AI is going to be doing for games in the next 5 years. Yeah.
Oh yeah, definitely. I never even thought about that tactical command application, and now that I think about it, it sounds really extra cool when you put in AR VR into the picture, and it really feels like you're with your squad, trying to take stuff down. And I guess there's gonna just be an accent barrier a little bit. I think it's gonna be harder for British people, unfortunately, or French people. Sorry, Quentin, to command your squad around. They might not understand what you're saying. What also is kind of interesting though is the speed at which technology enhances, because technology in itself, right? You have a lot of it has a lot to do with calculations, and the better computers are at calculating things, then that's why more research is being done, and it's growing exponentially. Musk said that if we are already developing technology to a state that simulations look like real life, then it's just a matter of time until they become somewhat indistinguishable from one another. So that's just another really interesting kind of, are we already a simulation? Are we in the Matrix? Who knows? We really don't know. But yeah, AI, I think, and Web3 could really go hand in hand in that disruption. And the reason I say that is because Web3, decentralized tooling, transparency, ownership, they're very much espoused with open source code. And as you mentioned earlier, AI is also a really big hack to making things possible, fast tracking processes, and also amplifying a player's experience. So those two together might, be a really powerful, potent combination for really opening up the world, or also destroying everybody's computers. We don't know. It could be that three-body problem, and the computer just can't really deal with it, and it just starts to self-explode. But I guess only time will tell. What do you think of the usage of AI in designing games? So the mere gameplay, I think you spoke a little bit about it earlier on, but when it comes to stuff like player behavior analysis, proactive game design, what can an AI probably design its own game, or is that too scary territory to go into?
You mean design its own game, so a game for other AIs to play? I mean, I guess they can entertain each other however they want, but um, yeah, I mean, so I mean, call me a romantic, but I mean, certainly for the foreseeable future, I see AI sort of augmenting the human creative process rather than replacing it. Um, and but I mean, I certainly don't count it out. I mean, eventually, long term down the road, it certainly will be capable of it. I mean, um, uh, but you mentioned something which swerves me into a topic that I wanted to point out, and that is another use of AI. So, we talk a lot about generative AI, but one of the things that AI has gotten very advanced is the notion of classifiers, and the idea that an AI can see something and identify it, recognize it, or or put it into a category, or call it whatever it is. In other words, the ability to linearly extract features, and we have all sorts of mathematical models that allow to do um, primary component analysis and things like that, so that you can find the axes of most variance. But the ability for machines to, for example, analyze what players like. So, in other words, maybe you have all of these analytics. One of the things that the last generation of gaming and monetization was that we would collect huge amounts of data, into big data, and then churn it and churn it and churn it and look for patterns, right? So, maybe players who who play this way and that way, or who choose these levels, are more likely to buy these in-app purchases and things like that. So, the ability to provide to find these correlations, and classify, players and things like that, will increasingly give developers the ability to create custom tailored experiences and things that you know people like more, because we'll have a lot more visibility into what axes um you know are provide the greatest fun. If we crank up the difficulty here, what effect will it have on ultimate monetization? And I mean, that's we talk about fun and games being fun, but at the end of the day, game companies need to make money, right? So and if you want game companies to make more games, then they have to make money, so they have to monetize, right? So it's just a
Yeah.
fact of life. And so, the extent to which we can leverage these, more advanced classifying technologies to uh, better determine what players want, then, that's just going to be a boon for, at the end of the day, an enjoyable playing experience.
Yeah, and players don't like to waste time either with games that they just end up not liking at all. So these personalized recommendations might really be a win-win situation for both parties. It's going to be kind of like a Spotify playlist, but taken into the gaming world, if you will. Uh, we're also talking a lot about computations. Do you think AI will replace game engines down the line?
Game engines, you mean? So, if you're talking about things like Unity and Unreal. these different, Cocos, or these different game engines. Um, no. I mean, it's, at the end of the day, an engine is just a set of code which performs functions like rendering model, performing animation, skinning, rendering things to the screen. And so whether or not a game is created by a human or by an AI, uh, it still has to, render things in 3D. I mean, vertices need to be, triangles need to be decomposed into vertices and transformed and skinned and then, rendered and stuff. So, I mean, a game engine, it may be the case that the content, is very heavily um, uh, powered by AI in the sense that, for example, like an engine like Unity. I saw when back in I don't know, maybe sometime last year, there were some plugins that were coming into Unity, which would basically allow you to use natural language to control. You might say like, okay, create me a board, like a chessboard with some pieces on it, that sitting in this and this square, and it would be able to. And then I want you to write me an or a routine which places all of the pieces according to a chess configuration. And it actually can do that. I mean, so in other words, it can help you write snippets of code, but we're still quite a ways away from having it be able to write all of the game for you. And even so, then, the engine is here and the AI would be, pulling the strings and writing the code and creating the assets that go into the end. But at the end of the day, the engine is just a tool for, rendering or performing collisions or sending network packets. I mean, so it's sort of an orthogonal question.
Got
Where
it.
does the content come from versus what actually implements it?
I see. So it's more like engine is a tool. AI is probably the proponent of that tool, using that tool to with the end goal of creating content. Got
Yeah,
it. Yeah.
yeah.
We're down to our last and final and best question of the night of the session, and is that do you think do you see any risks with AI? And basically boils down to the subtext of this whole event is, are the robots really taking over? It could also be a regulatory or existential question. What could possibly go wrong?
Well, I mean, so you and I were sort of schmoozing before the AMA started, um, but I mean, what could go wrong? um, so yeah, I mean, robots could take over the world, and we could all be dead. I mean, that's
Yeah.
that would bite. I'm not gonna say that's not a possibility. But I will say this, in terms of, okay, so you're talking about existential threats to humanity from NPCs. I don't know about that quite yet. I will say that is that sort of props to sci-fi and media and things like that, because I think that people really are taking a pretty responsible approach towards safe and responsible AI. And I mean, in terms of aligning with human motivations and things like that. There are some things which you talk about, sort of self-improving AI, and one day could Skynet sort of become self-aware. you know it's not going to happen by accident. So in other words, like, one day we won't just wake up and the code that I wrote for an NPC is going to somehow become self-aware and then blackmail me, somehow out of, it's going to hack into my computer, blackmail me, somehow motivate me to, do its bidding, and then take over the world. A lot of the functionality has to be very deliberately created. So the ability to for AI to reason in certain ways and approach goals. So I don't I don't in the short term. Again, it's a singularity, so it's hard to see past, but see things just suddenly like Skynet. Boing, whoops! Oh, we're dead. It may be the case that some bad actors out there, in some weird part of the world that's very low regulation, steal huge corpuses of training data. And again, training data is actually a very important thing here, and it's a big moat because these companies like OpenAI, they spend hundreds of millions of dollars to train these models, and so and that data is jealously guarded by its owners, and so the ability for some nefarious person to get their hands on these petabytes of data, of training data, and then hundreds of millions of dollars worth of compute in order to have the to train up models that will kill us and be misaligned or disaligned with human goals. It doesn't look like it's going to be something that just, like I said, whoops, happens by accident. Um, and like I said, I mean, I think that because of movies and Skynet and the Matrix and things like that, there's been enough fear sort of thrown into the public consciousness such that I think we'll take it more carefully than people originally imagined. When you talk about risks, a related concept is challenges, and I mean, there are a lot of things. So one of the things that I was mentioning before is that because AI is such a black box, then this concept of explainability is something which is an integral part of the challenge, and tangentially the risks. And that is, what is making this AI, to try to explain why an AI gives a particular response or exhibits a particular behavior. I mean, so you hear about Gemini giving these super politically correct answers, to the point of being not useful at all. And it's because they can train these models, but then they don't really know what's deeply going on inside them. And so one of the big challenges is going to be teasing out this because we have these these hundreds of the language models are built on these 100 700 escape um element vectors, which have all of these different dimensions. And so trying to understand, I mean, if it's hard to think in 3 or 4 dimensional space for a person, these things are thinking in 768 dimensions. And so trying to figure out how changing a little thing will cause a change somewhere else without affecting other things, very challenging.
Yeah.
um and also determinism, like you try tweaking the prompt a little bit, and it results in a dramatically different output, because of the huge number of this butterfly effect of huge number of chaotically interacting things, is a big challenge and therefore a risk. Because in some ways it's kind of this genie in this bottle that we don't fully understand how it works. So that's a big risk. I'm prattling on, and I realize we're up against time. I don't know whether you wanted to leave a little time for Q&A, or whether you just wanted to kind of call it.
Yeah, we can definitely call it. I think the Q&A could be probably postponed to our Discord. So if you guys have any questions of any sort, do leave them in our Discord or online on Twitter, everywhere else where this video would be posted. Because I think we are a little short in time, but then I think it's time well spent. And I'd like to thank you also, Andrew, for enlightening us, giving your bread and butter, and giving us the toast of it all, basically, when it comes to AI and gaming. It's been really insightful.
Yep, I love the topic. So you can hardly, I mean, as you can see, it's hard to get me to shut up about it. So
Oh yeah, well, saddened that it has to come to an end, but then that's some very poignant thoughts that we're left with when it comes to AI, responsibility, creativity, building, science, and even a little bit of science fiction in there as well. So yeah, I do wish everybody a good rest of their day, and also to you, Andrew.
great. Well, great to have this opportunity, and yeah, I'll see you all soon at the next AMA.
Oh yeah, definitely. Bye everyone.